Can all of you see this presentation? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Can
Yes, sir.
somebody answer? Can you see this presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's
Okay.
visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So as I had told you, we would be deliberating on social responsibility of institutions of higher learning. And we are all in the process of higher learning, and we represent institutions of higher learning. You had been a student of a university or a college, and you are in the profession of teaching, research, and academics. And what exactly is the social responsibility of institutions of higher learning other than the basic fundamentals that we have learned about education? Basically, education is considered to be a transformative process where individuals are shaped up to serve the society at the end of this process of learning. And institutions are facilitating this process. And at the end of the graduation or post-graduation or whatever degree you take, you become a learned personality who can be instrumental in the process of development. So there had been several philosophies, several things about the very objective of learning. I think you might see this presentation to be a bit academic.
Hello.
But I don't think it would be difficult for you to comprehend. You need not listen to or need not concentrate only on the text which is given in the presentation. You can rather listen to my words, and while doing that, you can look at the text and find out what exactly has been described. So this is one presentation which I had made for some other context, and I have not customized it to suit your purpose wholly. So there could be some academic rigor in this presentation in the initial part of this, which I think we can overcome by proper explanation. So in fact, as I told you, the true education has got the objective of human reflection and action, and it is a process to transform the world. Transformation of the world in a desirable way is something which is very difficult to explain. But still, philosophers, educationists have explained education as a process of transformation. It is not only a process of transformation of the individual, it is also transformation of the world as a whole. So how do you become instrumental in this process of transformation is very important. So basically, education is not a process in which you try to acquire capabilities to memorize things. Rather, it is acquiring capabilities for self-discovery and learning the whole universe around you, various phenomena that you find every moment. And when you look around, you can see different things, different processes, different objects, and also different concepts, the society as a whole, its elements, its components, various factors, etc., etc. The whole nature as a phenomenon is explained and interpreted. So basically, it is a question of self-discovery, and it is a question of acquiring the knowledge as to how to learn. And concomitantly or alongside, it also fosters personality development, which is again a very, very vague concept. What exactly is a personality, and how can you define that personality? How does it become positive or negative? All those things have to be explained. And basically, it is how do you find a role in the society? How do you become an essential element in the society wherein you live? And how can you be of help to the community around you? And through right intervention, how can you stimulate social progress. So if education cannot do this, education is not going to be of any use. But education as a practice as you must be knowing, is a paradigm of action or a model of action. It is an actionable activity, concept. The praxis of education would be basically aiming at strengthening communities and stimulating social progress. So in which direction is another question. But employing knowledge or making use of knowledge in transforming the society is one of the most vital output of education. So how does it happen? And how can that be acquired? How can somebody train someone to acquire this capability? How can you improvise your education in such a way that it can be instrumental in the process of social transformation? This is something which has to be very seriously understood by the teaching community, by researchers, by scholars. So it does not mean that every research activity or academic activity would directly have any benefit on society. That is a different thing. It could be indirect benefits also. But at some point of time, it enriches your understanding about the nature. It enriches your understanding about the world around. And that becomes instrumental in making change happen in the positive direction. So that exactly is the role of education as an instrument of social transformation. So how should the society transform is another question which has to be debated. So it should be whether it should be having an egalitarian society, whether it has to be a spiritual society, or it is a combination of both. That is something different. That is something which has to be debated. So it is based on your ideology, which is based on your concept of development. It differs from person to person. So basically, education should be able to inspire, provoke, and motivate the free and active participation of individuals in their reality. So basically, even though it's a very complicated sentence which I have given in the presentation, the crux of this is you should be able to understand the nature around you, the society around you, and you should also know how can you freely active, freely involve or participate in this reality and be a useful element in it, and you can be a useful person to make changes in the atmosphere around you. So basically, development is finding out solutions to problems. So as we grow, as we move forward, there could be obstacles, there could be issues, there could be problems which have to be resolved. And resolving these problems are basically, or resolving these problems is basically an issue of application of knowledge. And how do you use your knowledge to solve the issues around you is the practical output of education. So you might have heard about Paulo Freire, who is a great thinker and educationist, who had come up with several radical concepts on education, who had talked about liberating education. And he has put it rightly as education could be recovering the human capacity to evaluate, compare, choose, decide, and act upon the world. And it is more crucial now than ever before. So you have to act upon the world, and you have to find the right course. You have to choose the right option. And in that process, knowledge should be the fundamental element. And knowledge creation is the fundamental process. And application of knowledge to facilitate this change is the fundamental activity. And that is what is expected out of institutions of education and educated individual for that matter. So when it comes to higher education, this is basically the one which I had quoted from Paulo Freire, which is mostly about pedagogy or whatever way you pronounce it. So now when it comes to higher education, it is pursuit of more deeper knowledge. So higher education has got several dimensions. Higher education has got several meanings. It is pursued, it is perceived, and it is defined and explained in different ways, in different countries, in different contexts. So in India, it has got its own relevance for that matter. In a well-developed economy, it has got a different norm or notion altogether. So good or bad, across the globe, the key aims of higher education is you have to have provisions to foster all-round personal development and educate citizens who are responsible, informed, and committed to working for a better future. It is not a question of getting a job, or it is not a question of having your livelihood assured through your education. Basically, governments and other agencies are spending this much on human resource development, not for individual benefits. Basically, it is for reconstruction of the society and to sustain the society as a vibrant unit. So that means if you really want to accomplish these objectives, if you really want to do this, if you really want to make education a process of transformation, if you really want to make education a tool to sustain your society, if you really want to make education a tool for development, if you really want to make education a tool for comprehensive understanding of the universe, the education system has to undergo profound transformation. So some change has to happen in the process of education as well. So it should be done based on the needs of the society and the individuals. And unless you understand the needs of the society, you will not be able to devise ways and means by which you solve the problems of the society. Unless you understand the life of human beings around you, you will not be able to understand the requirement of the society. Unless you understand the causes of the problems which has grappled the society, you will not be able to find out solutions. So that is why you say that understanding of the society or the possibilities of applying your discipline or your field of knowledge to solve the issues of the society is very important in the process of education. Basically, universities are social institutions that perform strategic functions. What are the strategic functions? Basically, social institutions are, universities are places where knowledge is created. And as I told you earlier, knowledge is the fundamental tool by which a society gets transformed. And you can see in the entire course of human evolution, knowledge has been the fundamental tool. It was out of a practical knowledge or practical requirement that knowledge was created or generated. And that was why basically human beings turned to the process of research or introspection or finding out answers to issues or problem solving, etc., which has led to all sorts of technologies which we use right now. So that means universities are the most important institutions, or higher education colleges are the most important institutions which go for or which perform the strategic function of knowledge creation. And this knowledge creation is very much for the development of the society and also consolidation of the society. Say, for example, we are undergoing one of the greatest pandemics in the entire history of humankind. It has transformed our lives. We are no longer the human beings which we had been prior to January or February. The world has changed. Our priorities have changed. All the normal norms of life have changed. Now the new normal is different one, which you have not experienced so far. It is unprecedented. The new normal, which is something called new normal, which we right now have, is something which is different from what we had earlier, 3 months back. So that means systems have changed. But still, that the society is consolidated. I am doing this webinar through a tool which can have access to people who are staying away from me. I can speak to hundreds of people at a time, situated at remote places. So this has been made possible through technology. And you try to understand how this technology has evolved. It has been basically because of very rudimentary understanding of the electronic systems. It has started from various problem solving exercises done by various scientists, sometimes even amateurs, not even professional school dropouts, etc., etc. They almost all of them have inquired about possibilities of having access to remote places without personal contact. So basically, something which had started centuries back had now come to this kind of a technology wherein I can see and interact and speak and can do anything remotely. See, what exactly has been the impact of this technology? Even while we are amidst a pandemic which restricts our movement, we are now able to communicate each other. So there is some kind of a consolidation which has happened, some kind of a compactness instilled into the society as a result of technology, knowledge. So you can find this kind of examples from anywhere you see. Wherever you go, you can see the application of technology. Wherever you go, you can see how improvisation of technologies have helped humans to move forward, to progress. I think it does not require any further explanation at all. So that means all of these things have originated, majority of such knowledge bases have originated from universities. And now, with this technological advancement and with these issues, problems coming in, this has necessitated the reinvention of our universities, reinvention of our higher education institutions, reinvention of the process of education itself, so as to meet the emerging demands, emerging challenges which humanity faces. So that means a new world calls for a new kind of university or higher education institution which can creatively redefine its missions and functions. So that means as changes happen, as new challenges come up, it can be a natural calamity, just like the floods that we had. It could be a war which has happened in Syria. It could be a tsunami which is constantly happening in places in Southeast Asia. It can be something else. It can be a pandemic like this. It can be a famine. It can be any calamity which can happen, or it can be a technological advancement which is going to transform the entire world. So at any instance, we should reinvent. The first institution to reinvent itself would be the knowledge center, which is the university or the higher education. That means unless you have proper understanding of what is happening around, unless you have proper understanding of how human lives go forward, and higher education institution would not be able to reinvent itself. So this is very important, because to summarize whatever I have told you so far, see, human growth is basically knowledge based, and universities and higher education institutions are places where knowledge is created, and this knowledge which has led to technology has compacted human life, which has consolidated society, and it has made the society sustainable. So the process of growth can sustain only when new technologies come up, for which universities and higher educations have to be equipped. And unless you understand the needs of the people, you would not be able to find out solutions to the problems. So this is quite evident. This is quite clear that if you really want to go forward, if you want to change according to times, you have to reinvent yourself. And I think this is the context in which you are talking about the social relevance of universities. So basically, to reiterate whatever I have told, you can just go through this slide. You can see that social changes have shaped higher education institutions. I told you this earlier. It is the social change or whatever changes that have happened which has transformed higher education institutions. I do not know how many of you know how universities have evolved. India can boast of two ancient universities, and basically that was one reason why, because that was basically the fallout of the civilizations which had existed at that time. Recently, there had been an article on Nalanda University, the hugeness of Nalanda University. See the diversity of students it used to accommodate, the diversity of disciplines it used to teach, and people from faraway places, even across the sea, had come in search of knowledge and had stayed there in the universities. You can see several ancient centers of learning, and also now see new universities are coming up. And basically, all these things have happened as a result of explosion of human activity, and also as a result of the increasing capacity to respond to external demands. And that exactly is one reason why universities have proliferated or higher education institutions have proliferated. You want to have more manpower. You want to have more skilled manpower. You want to have more people to pursue knowledge. You want to have more people to find out learned solutions to knowledge. So, I mean, to problems. So I think that exactly is the relevance of universities and higher education institutions. So, how does a university or a higher education institution become relevant is very important. How do you become relevant? Is it just that you conduct a degree program and give people your degrees, PhDs, and whatnot, whatever you want, and then produce them and you send them out to the society? Or is it that you are an institution which is of use to the people? You are an institution which can find out solutions to the problems of people. So is it possible? So basically what happens is there is a tendency nowadays to see that the notion of relevance, you can see the cursor moving, the notion of relevance as being concerned solely with the need for higher education to meet the demand of the economy and the productive sector. So sometimes what happens is the changes that have happened in the society, the technology which I have told you, the way in which universities have transformed has now landed in a particular stage of development wherein universities are regarded only as centers which would meet the demands of the economy and the productive sector. So there is some problem with this. I think as college teachers, you are apprehensive about the new changes that are happening in the education sector, particularly in India. We are going for a lot of privatization. You are going for a lot of changes in the curricula. You are going for a lot of occasionalization of education. You are talking about skills. Even humanities and other disciplines are now regarded as sources of skill development, or maybe the prospects of skill development of people or students is now being regarded as the most important aspect of education. So basically, this is important because we want to have the human resources, we want to have all these things, but there should be some pure pursuit of knowledge as well, which would reflect as a technology or a tool, or it would be having its application somewhere else. So what happens is nowadays the entire process of education is now being confined to the notion of having only the purpose of education as only to meet the demands of the economy and the productive sector. So for example, when there is an ICT boom, there would be graduates churned out from universities who are trained in the computers. When there is some other boom, there would be graduates churned out from. So there is a reflection of such social realities in education. But at the same time, it should not be a mechanical centers to produce human resources only for a particular sector of economy. Rather, there should be diversification of pursuit of human knowledge, which would be having impact on the societies, sometimes maybe later, sometimes maybe indirectly. So now it has to be defined, it has to be made clear. So basically, the last portion you can read clearly: higher education must address these demands, but its relevance must be analyzed from a wider perspective that takes into account challenges that concerns society as a whole. The challenges that concern a society as a whole should also be a responsibility of the higher education institution. It is not just turning out graduates who can be human resources for a company, human resources for a ICT firm, or human resources for a bank, or human resources for a place where there can be employment. Rather, it has to be something which is beyond that. It should be able to proactively contribute to the process of social development, and it should be able to take on the issues or the concerns of the society as a whole. So this is quite academic thing. I don't think it is of importance to you, but still, if you want to, maybe I can share this presentation also with the organizers. You can distribute if you require. There is absolutely no problem about it. And see, how do you evaluate the relevance of an education institution. I told you, education institutions has to undergo this transformation, has to undergo this change, and education institutions should take into consideration the concern of the society. It should be able to address the developmental requirements of the people around you. It should be able to foster development of your society. As you know, the society is not basically a fully developed one. We are now looking forward to several interventions by which we can develop the society. You compare the societies of the developed economies, it is absolutely different from what we have right now. I mean, what we have here in India. And for that matter, Kerala is a much older society when compared to other parts of the country. Yesterday, the Honorable Chief Minister had publicized a few data on the rate at which coronavirus is spreading and various indicators. It has shown that we are far ahead of other states in terms of containment, in terms of prevention, in terms of tracking, in terms of tests per million people, etc., etc. So many indicators have been listed by him. And those indicators try to tell that we are at a much higher advantageous position due to our interventions, due to a proactive attitude towards this coronavirus. Corona, I always repeat because this is something which is currently happening about something about which we are all concerned. So that is why, see that kind of changes are happening. Kerala society is a much evolved one. Whereas you compare it with the villages in UP or Bihar or maybe in remote places of some other places, you cannot see this kind of, say, public awareness, or this kind of, say, for example, your rural development, rural infrastructure, public health system, all those things are at very, very pathetic situation, deplorable condition. See, even within the country, there could be changes. Today, there is a news on the poor in China. The Chinese government has published that there are quite a lot of people who are poor, and this coronavirus has now made those people poorer. And the Chinese government is now thinking of giving social security networks and other incentives to these poor people. So likewise, it is changing every time. So the level of development is different. Even within the country, there could be different pockets of underdevelopment. So that means, such issues are there in the society. Such developmental problems are there in the society. And we are in the process of transforming the country into a much more developed area. And development per se is a notion which has to be understood from a different perspective. What do you really mean by development? Is it just your bridges, your very big buildings, and your private entrepreneurs, etc., etc.? No, it is one part of that. Basically, developmental indicators show that the people and their well-being, whether the people are good, that means not in terms of their character, whether the people have got good sources of livelihood, whether the development indicators of the people are on par with the world standards, whether they have good education, whether they have access to drinking water, whether they have food security, that is a very important thing, whether they have access to education, whether they have access to so many other requirements, basic requirements of life. So whether the government has been able to ensure all these things, whether technology is an impediment in this, whether you can transform your rural area by making use of these technologies, or is it a failure of the developmental agencies? Is it a failure of the government? So there are several dimensions to it. So that means the relevance of a higher education institution in the context in which I have been trying to explain this concept has to be measured in terms of indicators. And what are the indicators? The relevance of a higher education institution has to be measured in terms of what it can give to the society. How can it intervene in the society other than the normal functions that you do? Can you find out solutions to some of the problems of a community? Can you directly go and intervene and help people establish sustainable measures of their livelihood or their existence? Whether you can go out and maybe help people to come up in their lives, or whether you can produce students who are socially committed, or whether you can find out applications of your discipline. Say, for example, a commerce teacher could be of use to the society on various counts. I would come to those examples later. So how do you place yourself in the process of development? How do you place yourself in the entire process of development, and how do you find a place in solving the issues of people? Basically defines the relevance of an education institution. So evaluation of your relevance is very important. And unless you evaluate your relevance, then you would not be able to be an very instrumental or very effective organization for that matter. Because world over, there are several indicators by which the social relevance of institutions are measured. And I do not want to superimpose those indicators or those frameworks of analysis to this particular presentation. Rather, I would just try to draw your attention to the fact that the relevance of your institution as a college, say for example, St. Xavier's College for Women, Alua, how can it be socially relevant? And that has to be measured in terms of how much resources that you have, in terms of how many well-trained professionals you have, in terms of how much activities you can take up, in terms of what kind of research programs are being conducted by you, in terms of how you can involve your students in the process of co-curricular, extracurricular, and even academic activities wherein these things would reflect. So all those things have to be explored. Maybe we can think of such things later as a part of maybe our action plan or something as part of the UBA. I do not want to go to such details, but I just want to give a hint that relevance of a society, an institution in the social context is something important, and the relevance is assessed based on the characteristics of your organization, the diversity, the mission and objectives, and how you organize your activities. So all those things are important. I think UBA, as I pass on to the next portion of my presentation, you would understand that UBA would be giving you a wonderful opportunity to reflect on this and come out with certain propositions which would make your organization relevant to the society. So, as I told you, relevance is the key criterion when it comes to evaluating and verifying the quality of higher education. And the relevance and quality is very important. You know, NAC accreditation and so many other nitty-gritty with regard to your ranking and things of that. I do not want to go to those details. Our institutions are different as well, because I belong to an agriculture university, which is a technical university where we mostly deal with technologies and its dissemination and kinds of things. And your institution is basically an academic institution where I don't think much of research is being done. And also you are not into outreach activities or extension activities. Maybe you would be doing it only partially, but it's not a big mandate for you. And also maybe I can reflect on these things because I am now the current president of the Federation of University Teachers Association. I know what is happening across universities. There are certain technical universities which are exclusively into research and other things, but most of the other general universities are diverse in their domains, diverse in their terms of references, diverse in their mandates, and there are so many disciplines, sometimes some of which may not find to be very relevant to the society for that matter directly, because they must not be dealing with technology and things of that kind. But good or bad, those disciplines also can have social relevance in several aspects. I think your important point should be to explore how various disciplines that are present in your university or your education institution can be instrumental or can be made use of in the process of development of your society. So again, I know that my definition, with the definition which I have made in this presentation about development, is a very sketchy one, because I have got volumes to speak about that, but we don't have much time. We have got only 40 minutes or so. And I don't think I would be able to explain the nitty-gritty of development, and particularly the issues of rural development, in this single session. Maybe we can have further sessions if you would like to have it later on. But now I just want to put it in, contextualize it and put it in perspective, that development process, in whatever way it happens, and how do you rate yourself as an effective organization in the context of developmental requirements of the people around you, is something which has to be considered seriously as an indicator of relevance and an indicator of the quality of higher education. So now they would like to introduce a concept called university social responsibility, or it can be institutional social responsibility also. The university you replace with college, or university you replace with the name of your college, whatever it is a recent concept, and it is now being practiced in the academic world. That is, what exactly is the university social responsibility? The mandatory social responsibility of bringing up graduates, conducting academic activities, we have already said. There is no doubt about that. That is the fundamental activity of every college, every university. Creation of knowledge is the most important activity, and that is what universities are meant for. At the same time, in the emerging world, in the emerging context, particularly in the emerging scenarios of this pandemic and things that are going to follow this, particularly in view of the transformation which are going to happen in our economies, particularly in view of the changes that we are going to have in our society, particularly in view of the fact that knowledge is going to be the fundamental element in transforming societies, this concept is very important. That is, the university social responsibility proposes that universities should educate responsible professionals and citizens, and also to contribute to the economic, social, and cultural development, promoting social justice, which is very important. It should contribute to the economic, social, and cultural development as much as possible, promoting social justice. This is very important. I would like to underline this particular thing, and I would like to speak on that also a bit more, because all our concepts of development have changed over a period of time. Particularly students would be realizing it now. See, when I was in the college, when we were doing our education in our colleges and universities and research institutes where I had worked, and when I had been taught, I have learned. See, the kind of status women used to get was pathetic, was deplorable. You could go rag somebody, you could comment, you can have outrage the modesty of women at that time. That was considered to be a privilege for the male counterparts. So see the society right now, you cannot utter even a single word against a woman or a girl. And if at all somebody dares to do it, it is an offensive activity. It is punishable. Society has started responding. Women empowerment has really shown its presence. The current day or the present day girls are much more courageous, bolder than what they had been earlier. You can ask your mothers what had been the situation earlier. So now we are aware of such things. See the transgenders, for example. Kerala at least have come forward to receive them. We are giving appropriate or due respect and concern for them. The disabled. So we are now using politically correct comments. We are now learning to respect others. And we are trying to do away with the caste system. You cannot bash a Dalit right now. So likewise, there is a question of social justice spreading across the society. There is an element of understanding that social justice is important. There is an understanding that every human being is important. There is an understanding that every human being has got dignity. And you are not supposed to discriminate anybody based on any particular criterion. So that means you are talking about inclusive development. Any budget passed by the government should be having an element of gender mainstreaming in it. We have to have special programs for all these sections of people. It is not just men alone. It is not just the rich alone. We are talking about inclusiveness, containing everyone. So this social justice is very important. Development has assumed this particular emphasis of late. And this emphasis has to be reflected in your curriculum, in any development process. So that means the society is changing not only technologically, the society should change in terms of humanitarian values, in terms of developmental values, in terms of social justice, in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of political correctness, and in ever so many other ways. So that means all these concepts have evolved from universities, I would say. So many scholars have worked on gender studies. I would just tell an example. See, someone would say, what is the relevance of sociology in development? Why should you understand sociology or psychology or geography or maybe language or something? And what exactly is going to have, what is the impact of this particular discipline on social development? See, gender as a concept has evolved as a result of various deliberations done by people, their responses to discrimination as women, and then university professors have started writing about this. They conceptualized it, they theorized it, they came up with propositions that gender biases are due to various reasons. Some of them explored the history of that. Some of them tried to find out the social dimensions. Some of them started exploring the policy implications. So when it started in universities, when it started as a movement, people used to ridicule them. People used to tell that, okay, what is this happening? This is not natural. This is unnatural. But see the situation. Over a period of time, as a result of rigorous academic activities, as a result of several debates, protests, and things of that sort, gender concerns are now reflected in your legislations. Gender concerns are reflected in your policies. Gender concerns are reflected in all your activities. So that means a small academic activity which has been initiated by someone somewhere has now grown into a global phenomenon, and which has become a main part of your policy prescriptions. See, that is one example. So likewise, you can find out several examples where pure academic research would at some point of time turn out to be a bigger socially relevant concept, which would reflect or which would get reflected in policies. So that means this is very important. And all these aspects of economic, social, and cultural development with the underlying emphasis of social justice is very important. And I think university centers or higher education institutions, your college, they are all instrumental in propagating this concept of development. That's very important. So now, how do you become socially relevant is very important. That also has to be explored. How can education be a tool for change? Just make an introspection. Whether these concepts which I have pointed out as an example, whether it has reflected in your curriculum, whether you have taken your students to the rural areas, whether you have asked your students to observe the society around you, whether they have found out any trend or tendencies in discrimination of different sections of people. Have you ever seen issues of development which are related to the lives of people in rural areas and urban areas? Say, for example, see what is happening as a fallout of this pandemic is rural migration, which is happening. You have seen the most deplorable and most pathetic picture from one of the railway stations in Bihar, a young mother dying out of solar radiation, dewatering, and a small child of 2 years playing around the corpse, the dead body. See, almost about 500 people have died on their way to their houses. And back to their villages, people do not find any source of livelihood. People who have left Kerala are now trying to come back. And there had been huge exodus, migration from urban to rural areas, which was the reverse earlier. See, so many things are happening around us. There is a beautiful book written by P. Sainath, who was the development correspondent of The Hindu, who has written about everyone loves a good drought, wherein he has portrayed the pathetic situation, deplorable conditions of the rural poor in India. Even in Kerala, you can find some pockets, even though it is very, very, very less. You can find out some pockets where such discriminations happen. Such issues exist. It need not be social discrimination alone. Maybe think of your waste management, think of your health, think of your contagious disease, think of malnutrition, think of your tribal settlements, think of several other segments wherein development is a big concern. See, whether these concerns are reflected in your classrooms, whether you have given assignments to your students based on such issues, whether you have sent your children for, say, a literacy program, whether language students have gone and found out what exactly functional literacy is, whether they have developed any program to go to the people and teach them how to read and write. So likewise, this is one example. So how do you integrate the issues of development with your curriculum, with your day-to-day activities? How do you make it more creative? How do you make it more relevant? And how do you improvise? How do you become? Improvisation is one form of creativity, you know. The same assignment which is given to a student can be in a much more improvised manner, provided you apply your mind and you do something about that. So in fact, say for example, environmental concerns. Environmental concerns is one big example. So how many of you know about the ways in which our forests are being degraded? How many of you know that our land use is totally skewed? A lot of space is being earmarked for unproductive purposes. So likewise, you know, look around and you can find a host of issues which are coming. Sometimes it will be locally relevant, but it has got global applications. You have got the sustainable Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs and MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, promulgated by the UN, almost about 13 Millennium Development Goals, which are very important for humankind, very important for humanity. So whether these Sustainable Development Goals, which every country in the universe or on the surface of Earth has to follow, whether those concerns have got reflected in your classrooms. So these are some examples which I would like to share with you, and to reiterate and establish that any institution of higher education can be socially relevant if they really try to improvise and find out ways by which these development concerns get reflected in their activities. And I would also like to tell you a few things about demographic dividend. I do not know how many of you must be knowing that. Most of you must be knowing that, I presume. Demographic dividend is an important advantage for India. Demographic dividend is nothing but the number of young people who have the health and capability to work. Take the example of Italy, which was devastated by Corona. You can find out that Italy and such other European countries have got very high population of old age people. Their span of life is much higher. Their new generation does not want to get married. They are not interested in procreation. They would like to pursue their careers. The governments are insisting people to produce more people, and they give incentives to increase their population because they don't have people to man their activities. Whereas India, for that matter, is having a teeming population, teeming millions, 130 crores of people, out of which people who are considered to be productive are people between the age of 15 to 55, even more than that, 15 to 55. So that means after 10 years from now, by 2030, India would be one country which will be having the most productive population in the world. And it is presumed that India would be making a good fortune, a big fortune, by exporting its human resources to other countries, because other countries do not have adequate population to man their things. So just like the Kerala diaspora, Malayali diaspora. Right now we have, so many people are abroad. The Indian population will also be serving several countries across the world due to its sheer advantage of this. This is called demographic dividend. But the problem is, unless your human resources are skilled, unless you have trained them, they will not be of any use. They will end up as housemaids or small artisans or small petty people who would be doing only mean work, very mean work. So I think unless you train them, unless you skill them, this advantage is not going to be of use to us. So demographic dividend has got something to do with higher education and also education. So it is said that estimated that India has got provision for again 500 more universities because the people who are enrolled in higher education is very less when compared to developed countries. Very less. And even if people get enrolled, the quality of education meted out to them is also very less, very low. So there is a provision for more number of education institutions, more institutions of higher education. But there are still other issues, whether it is going to be in the public sector, private sector, whether it is going to be in the voluntary sector. All those things are big, important issues of debate, which I do not want to explore right now. But this demographic dividend of skilling people and making people more productive is a major concern for us. So basically, several universities have come up with this kind of socially relevant. They have tried to make themselves socially relevant. And it is not a new task, basically. It has happened way back in the 18th century, 17th century with Oxford, which had come up with several out-of-school education outreach programs. They just wanted their professors to talk to people about various things which are happening within the university and what are the practical applications of their research on the lives of people. Say, for example, you know how to wash off your germs, your viruses and bacteria if you using a sanitizer. See, this might be a very, very usual practice that we do every day, several times a day, particularly because of this pandemic. But a lot of research might have gone to this, to standardize the materials which can be used as a sanitizer or something of that sort, which has got direct application on health like this, hygiene, agriculture. So likewise, electricity. So many things which can be simply explained by the professors of universities to people. So there was a movement in Oxford and Cambridge way back in 1782 or so, when they decided that we are doing research within the confinements of our university in classrooms and laboratories. Most of the people do not know what exactly is happening within the universities. And we publish papers, and some of them get published for public consumption by people. Some say, for example, Stephen Hawking writing a good book, a simple book, would make you understand what Stephen Hawking had been doing. And if you had not done that, it would have remained with himself or maybe a small group of people who can understand theoretical physics. Other people would not understand that at all. So that what happens is, unless you go and reach out to the people and tell people that we are doing such and such things which are of use to you, then why don't you explain that to the people? So for example, we know about the corona vaccine. People have explored how a vaccine is created, basically because it is a requirement for us. So likewise, so many things are happening in laboratories. So many things are happening in classrooms. So many things which have got practical application for people are happening within the confinements of universities. Why don't you explain those things to people? Why don't you go and teach common people about such things? Why don't you make them aware of that? Why don't you conscientize them? So this is what is called outreach activities. And how do you make up interfaces with the university? How can a common man come to the university or a higher education institution for some service, for a knowledge input, or for getting an advice, or for giving maybe to help them find out a new employment, or to establish a business firm, or to find out a solution to an issue, a technology which can be proposed. So likewise, see, for example, many of the chemistry departments of our colleges had produced sanitizers, low-cost sanitizers during the initial phases of coronavirus infection. Later on, okay, it is not a big problem right now in the market, but many people have shown that idea. Whether maybe that is a fallout of such situations. So the chemistry teacher can make a sanitized and can be given to the people, or at least you can teach an entrepreneur as to how to do it, and you can facilitate that person to produce much more. You need not do it every time. It can be done by another person who can do this. So this interface has to be understood. How can we do that? And there are rural immersion programs. That means immerse yourself in rural activities. An education institution can go to a rural area, find out issues, propose something. Say, for example, when we were studying, when we were in the graduate level, the university unions of all the universities at that time, there were not so many universities like this. Now we have 14 universities. We had only 5 or 6 universities at that time, way back in 1987, 88. So we had a program of Vidyarthikal Janahridayangalekku, so students going to the hearts of people. So a contingent of students were pooled, just like much better than our NSS activities for that matter. So there had been people from medical college, from agriculture university, from engineering colleges, from veterinary university, from other normal general colleges. We grouped, we formed groups of ourselves, and we went to the rural areas. We made extensive surveys about their developmental issues, and then came up with solutions. And we stayed in the village, not only for the survey and the interaction program. Then we thought of coming back to the village several times a year afterwards on behalf of the college, and then started, the medical college students started a clinic, the veterinarians started a clinic for animals. The people from agriculture then started distributing seeds and other things, and we started establishing kitchen gardens and things of that sort. Then we started giving advisories on crops and all that. And the microbiologist of some college came and found out that the swimming pond in that village was infested by one bacteria, which has led to some infection of students. I mean, children who used to swim in the pond. They came up with a remedy for that. So likewise, I recollect those days when I do not say that I do not want to glorify those days, but even much more things are happening right now. But we just, there are possibilities of finding out problems, and that is what is called rural immersion program. And I would like to present the case of a very important person who had made so much of impact on the lives of people from a university. You might have heard about this person. He is none other than Dr. Muhammad Yunus. He is our neighbor. He belongs to Bangladesh. And he is a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. And he is a social entrepreneur, banker. More than that, he was a professor of economics in Chittagong University. And basically, this is a person who had come up with the idea of Grameen Bank and this women's self-help groups. We have the Kudumbashri here. Basically, Kudumbashri owes its origin or its concept to Muhammad Yunus. Muhammad Yunus was the person who found out the concept of self-help groups and Grameen Bank. So I do not know how many of you know his story. He was a professor of economics, and their university was situated on the top of a hill in Chittagong. And in his department, he used to send his students of economics, I think MA or PhD or maybe graduates. He used to send their children, his children, to the foothills of that university or the hill where the university is situated, to find out the ways in which the poor people live. And the foothills of this hill or the region on the valley was mostly, it was weavers, bamboo weavers. And these bamboo weavers had been finding it very difficult to make a livelihood out of their activity because of lack of loan. There was no financial assistance to buy the raw materials, reeds, by which they make baskets and other things, weavers, bamboo weavers. So the students came back and presented their inferences to the professor. And he thought of finding out a solution to their issues. So he thought of meeting them. There had been a series of meetings with these bamboo weavers, and he found that the most important impediment or the most important reason for their poverty, and that to perpetual poverty for that matter, almost throughout the year, that poverty is basically because they do not get credit to buy the raw materials. So then he approached a few banks and they abjectly denied his request. They said they don't have the payback capacity. They are not credit worthy. In banking parlance, it is called credit worthiness. They cannot pay it back because they don't have any assets. So banks used to give credit only to those people who can pay them back, pay the credits back. So these poor people don't have any assets, so they cannot be given any loan. It was at that point of time he thought of having small amounts of money. Basically, he paid it from his pocket initially. He amassed some money from his colleagues, his students, and all that, and started paying these bamboo weavers. And then he said, you can buy raw materials out of this money. You can buy your reeds, make your baskets, sell it in the nearby market, and when you get back the returns, after taking some amount for your your daily requirements, you have to deposit and give it back to me. You have to repay the credit. And to his, basically he presumed that these people would not pay back the money, but to his surprise he found that almost every one of them had paid back the money when there was constant supply or constant sources of revenue. So they even forsake their meals and they showed a tendency to pay it back promptly. And that was how he thought of instituting a mechanism to give small loans to these poor people so that they will get money for their raw materials and they will pay it back to the lender later on. So this concept he developed, and then it formed the shape of a small rural bank, which was called the Grameen Bank, which was priced by developmental agencies. And now all the global developmental agencies are proposing the self-help groups as a mode of development, which is a new social capital formation, a source of social capital formation, a mode of developing the society. And we have seen the amazing growth of self-help groups under the banner of Kudumbashree in Kerala as well. Kudumbashree was one example where they are into several different businesses, enterprises, diverse businesses they are involved in. And they have got, I think, an asset worth 1,500 crores or so, even more than that. I do not know exactly. They have become a corporate entity right now. See, that concept owes to this small research which was initiated in a university in Bangladesh, which made him eligible for a Nobel Peace Prize. So I just wanted to draw your attention to this kind of interventions which have happened. I can enlist thousands of such cases where people have been helped by different institutions. Say, for example, the IIT Delhi, for that matter, there is a Rural Technology Center which is coordinating the UBA. Earlier, there was a professor called Rajendra Prasad, and they had conducted surveys in Uttar Pradesh, in the rural areas of Uttar Pradesh. And then they found that the way in which farmers are keeping their milk of their buffaloes and cows, they do not have a feasible mechanism of storing milk for a longer time. The shelf life of milk was a big issue for them. So they had a very indigenous technology. The scientists went there, engineers went there and took it back to their laboratory, then improvised it in such a way that a very small change which they made into that conventional system had increased the capability of storage of milk several folds, and it has reflected on the livelihood of such people much more than any other technology would have done. So these small interventions, there are umpteen number of such examples where universities or knowledge centers have been instrumental in shaping up the lives of people. In the agriculture university, we are always doing that. We are working on cropping patterns, various production activities and things of that sort. And we have got a well-defined research system, and we have got an extension system. And I am the director of that extension wing, the extension directorate. We are involved in disseminating that knowledge to people. So this process, which is a mandatory function of agriculture university, cannot be taken up by other universities due to various constraints. But still, you can think the possibilities of your social relevance by improvising your activities and trying to find out opportunities to have your own programs in places nearby your institution. So coming back to a few more slides, 2 or 3, and I would conclude. Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, for that matter, you are also a member, as I understand. It's a participating institute. I'm not going to the details of that. This is a program by the Ministry of Human Resource Development to engage higher education institutions in the process of rural development. The main contention is that rural lives have to be transformed, and that can be done by application of technologies, just like what I have told you right now. You, as learned, as knowledgeable people, as professors, as teachers, as researchers, as scholars, as students, we can also be part of the process of rural development. We can go and teach people new practices. You can find out new solutions to their problems. You can make several researchable issues out of their problems and their requirements. And that can be given back to those societies, and they would benefit out of that. So basically, the concept is a magnanimous concept. It's a very important and beautiful concept. How can you link higher education institutions into the process of rural development? Basically, to involve the reputed higher education institutions, technical, non-technical, public, private, every genre for that matter, of the country in the process of indigenous development of self-sufficient village clusters. Basically, there is a problem with these village clusters. Other than Kerala, villages are in clusters in other states, not in Kerala. Kerala, we have got a rural-urban combine, wherein all the houses are situated in small pockets of land, which is called homesteads. We cannot have cluster villages here. Whereas you go to Tamil Nadu, you can find hundreds of people living together at a place, and their farmland would be away from that, surrounding their households, their settlement. There would be hamlets. The farmland would be surrounding their hamlets. So that is called village clusters. Intervention will be more, and problems will also be more, sanitation, drinking water, health, and so many other things. So basically, this Unnat Bharat Abhiyan is designed to cater to the requirements of particularly Indian villages per se or at large, whereas Kerala also can have its own improvised ways of Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. I think those nitty-gritty I would explain only later. Maybe you can be part of the workshops which should be conducted by ACER or your regional coordinating institute later on. They will be explaining such things. For the time being, you just want to understand what exactly is Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. And this mission of this program is to coordinate among educational institutions, implementation agencies, and grassroots level stakeholders. Education institution has to go to the villages, find out their problems, engage your students to find out the problems, take them back to your colleges and labs, and then find out solutions to help these people. Say, for example, you can conduct a survey of health, for example. You can conduct, say, as I told you, a commerce person, a commerce graduate, or a commerce professor can think of having a new method of accounting, to the self-help group. So you can help them formulate, help them teach them how accounts can be kept. A chemistry teacher can have maybe, say, you can think of having a small chlorinating material which can be used in the households. So likewise, each subject will be having some or the other kind of applications which they can find out to find out the solutions to people. So it can be a small household of 10 houses, or it can be a ward, or it can be something else. You can think of a nutritional survey. You can think of going and making people aware of, say, for example, nowadays, the pre-monsoon preparations to keep off contagious diseases are going on. The government has exhorted us to observe every Sunday as a dry day, wherein all the stagnant water has to be so that the breeding grounds of mosquitoes can be destroyed, which would certainly have an impact on our health. Dengue and so many other things are coming up during the monsoon. So mammoth activities are going on. So why don't you go and participate in such programs along with the panchayats, along with the people's representatives? See, likewise, say, for example, a pandemic is going on. You can think of giving more. These are all examples I want to tell you. You can go and help people understand what exactly is the mode of infection of this particular disease and how can you prevent them. So likewise, you can go around and find out several solutions, several problems, and you can suggest solutions. So basically, this Unnat Bharat Abhiyan wants to have a holistic development of rural clusters by eco-friendly, sustainable technologies, harnessing local resources, creating employment opportunities, harnessing multifarious government schemes, customization of existing technologies, use of local knowledge, etc., etc. I think if I start explaining all these 6 things, it would take hours together. So I do not want to do that. I think I have given a few examples by which we'll be able to associate with the rural areas as part of Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. So this is how it works. So this is the conceptual model in which UBA wants to have its interventions position. You can have human resource development, that means training people can be one component. Integrated development plan, you can think of preparing integrated development plans for rural areas. You can think of skill upgradation. Say, for example, you can say an engineering college or a physics division, maybe they can think of people, training people on, say, for example, repair of machines or such things. You can you can inculcate new skills, help improved health and environmental services, sustainable. Say environmental services basically is maybe you can go for afforestation. You can take the stock of the flora and fauna in a lake, or you can go and find out the biodiversity of a place. You can maybe help the Grama Panchayats to update the biodiversity registers. That is one thing which can be taken up by the botany department. The zoology department can go and find out what exactly is the diversity of their fauna and in a given area. So likewise, any kind of diverse activities can be done. Maybe you are doing such things, I do not know, you must be doing that thing. It is out of my experience. These are the issues, I mean, the ways by which you can engage yourself. You can also think of infrastructure development and things like that. So basically, it was conceptualized by a group of dedicated faculty members of IIT, and it was later on taken up by the MHRD and launched in 2014. Earlier, there were only very few people. Now they are going to upscale this program, and more institutions are being roped in. I think you are also part of that. You are given a small amount of money, based on which you can start your programs. And if you are doing well, you will certainly be eligible for special funds by the UBA. I think, as far as I understand, UBA Phase 2 has also been launched. I am a member of the National Executive Committee for that matter, and also regional coordinator, just like ASA. We have the central region of Kerala under the Kerala Agriculture University. That is how we work. So these data are all obsolete. They have gone far beyond that. I think several villages and several institutions have been covered. It is earlier data, 128 districts. Now it is almost about 500 districts or so. I would give you updated data afterwards. So as I told you, the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan 2, finding out that the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan 1 was very successful. Unnat Bharat Abhiyan 2 has also been launched, and they have given much clearer instructions to organizations as to how to conduct this Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. And see the last portion, you can see we can have field studies, the implementation of government schemes. This is one example. You can find out, say, for example, the economics division of your college can think of finding out how the MGNREGS, for example, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, has helped people in improving their livelihoods, for example. So what are the issues, the organization problems that these people face? They can think of decentralized planning in panchayats. They can find out how social welfare activities are being monitored and implemented and monitored by the government. So likewise, real life activities which have got direct implication on development can be taken up as small projects of study by your institutions, and you can come up with very relevant results which can be of use to the government as well as people around you. So likewise, there are so many things which you can do, and this is how basically Unnat Bharat Abhiyan works. And I think I have been doing it in exhaustively, much beyond than what was envisaged. It is almost about 12:15. I have taken more time than what has been allotted to me. I think I have not made it unbearable for you, and I think you have understood the basic concepts as well.
Thank
So it's
you,
over.
sir. The session was very fruitful. Okay, thank you, sir. The session was very informative and fruitful. And I hope this will inspire the participating institutes to do more activities in their adopted villages.
So you can
Now,
have questions. You can
Dr.
have questions. If you want to have questions, you can have questions for maybe 15 minutes or so. I am free to do that.
Okay.
And you can have questions, maybe for 10 minutes or so. People either can message their questions or they can ask. Better if you ask, people would not be able to.
Sir, one issue that we came across is that the St. Xavier's College for Women Alva is a participating institute under ISER Trivandrum. And we had an information, we had a news that we are going to be connected to some other institute, but we have not got any official information about it. And if you said Kerala Agricultural University is a regional coordinating institute,
Yes,
and
yes.
would you please explain the role of Kerala Agricultural University and compare the difference between the role of ISER and Kerala Agricultural University?
See, earlier there was only one regional coordinating institute, and that was ISER. ISER is a national institute, and there's a very big institute. Now it is in Vidura. Earlier that was in the campus of the College of Engineering, Trivandrum. They have shifted to Vidura, and it is an institution which is of high esteem. Getting an admission in ISER is a very prestigious thing, and they have scientists across the country and people from IITs, Indian Institute of Science, etc., teaching there. It's a very, very, very prestigious institution. So we also had joined the UBA because of that, because they were the regional coordinator and knowledge partner of this program along with the IITs. And later on, as when more and more people started subscribing to UBA thought of having more regional centers. So Agriculture University being the most important technical university of the state, and also we had enthusiastically participated in that program. So they thought they would make Agriculture University a regional coordinator. Then there were two coordinators, ACER for the southern part and Agriculture University for the northern part. Later on, when there had been more response, when there was more response to this program, when they wanted to enroll more and more institutions in the program, they thought of having another regional coordinating institute. So Northern Kerala is now under IIT Palakkad. So Northern Kerala, it is under IIT Palakkad. Central Kerala is under the Kerala Agriculture University, and the southern part is under AISER. So this is the kind of arrangement that they have made. And now they are going to make a few more changes, as I understand from them. They are going to have more regional coordinators, and also the regional coordination is going to have more directors, etc. So that will be coming maybe within 1 or 2 months. So
Okay.
if you are affiliated to ACER, you cannot change it seems, unless you write to the UBA and say that it is convenient for you to be under the Kerala Agriculture University. You can do, maybe you can make a try. Otherwise, it is not much possible. You have to be under the ISER. So the regional coordinating institute, based on their mandate, will be having different approaches. We are mostly into rural development and agriculture development and things of that sort, which will be having direct impact on the lives of people. Whereas ISER is mostly into technological solutions to rural issues. They are doing wonderful work. Last time they were elected as one of the best regional coordinating institute. I think it does not make much difference. You can have partnership with the Agriculture University also. If you want some kind of intervention, we will be able to help you. At the same time, maybe ACER is also a good option. It is up to you to decide. You can talk to those people and find out what are their activities. They have got brochures, etc.
Sir, in terms of distance, we have some
And now then,
inconvenience, and also if Kerala Agriculture University organizes some orientation courses for the participating institutes or other institutes which have not joined for UBA, it would have been a great help for us.
okay, 1 minute. Okay. I think you can write to them. You can write to UBA. You can send a letter to them asking this. So we will be happy to do that. I think yes, every regional coordinating institute will have to conduct such programs. They will also be conducting orientation program. Last time we had conducted 2 programs so far, and we have given orientation to all the participating. I have suggested 20 more institutions to UBA. For them also, I think we have to conduct new program. But I do not know by what time will these restrictions be over. We'll be able to do that only after this. Maybe only this is possible, either through some kind of video conferencing. We will have to do that.
Yes.
Maybe we will think of that. I think we will also be conducting. You can also be part of that. There is no problem. People from usually when you conduct this orientation program, we not only the regional coordinator is doing that. People from IIT Delhi also come down, and their entire team comes to the respective place, and they also speak to you. And representatives of AICT, representatives of stakeholders in the UBA program, they will also be, all of them will be speaking. It is going to be a comprehensive presentation. That will be very nice for you. Maybe we can think of write to them to have a few conferences like this. So they can also explain things. We'll be having more clarity about their conditions and the way in which. But the problem is, you cannot just compare the conditions in North India and other parts of the country to what is happening in Kerala. In Kerala, you have to go exclusively for your own programs. That is a challenge that we have. So what I have suggested, but better to associate yourself with the respective Grama Panchayats and other local bodies and try to integrate your activities with them. So likewise, some people have taken up poverty survey, some people have taken up the sanitation survey, some people have taken up food security survey. So likewise, there are several ways by which you can associate yourself in this program. And also, as I told earlier, you can assess your relevance for that matter.
Sir, there is some question for you in the chat box.
Yes. Let me see. About 97 queries have come. So Dr. P.P. Sajimon has asked whether the universities are showing their strength by placing or by showing the number of placements that they make. But he says that it is a kind of tool making for bonded labor. We never allow the students to find out job by making use of individual capabilities. So basically, in fact, that is an ideal proposition. If everybody can find out job on their own capabilities and if we can provide opportunities, that is the most ideal situation. But maybe in a country like India, we are yet to have that kind of a situation. We are forced to respond to the emerging job opportunities, and finding out a job exclusively based on your capability is not possible for everyone, for that matter. So if somebody can do that, somebody can wait till he can get a job of his capability, or the government has to come up with activities or programs to find out the aptitude of people and then foster them to pursue their aptitude and their interest. It would be ideal. But I would not say it is a bonded labor kind of a thing. See, every time these things happen, as a larger segment of the graduates would be going towards opportunities or avenues which are created by the economy, for that matter. So, for example, there was a boom of ICT, as I told you earlier, and it found appropriate for people to train more people on ICTs, for that matter. So, likewise, if agriculture is going to take much more prominence, agriculture would be able to provide opportunities for a large number. One segment, particularly the employment segment, cannot bypass this activity. You cannot insist that everybody will have to go according to their capabilities. Some kind of a standardization is done in education also. I don't think every student who is coming to a history class has come there out of their interest to history, interest for history. Most of them might have come out of compulsion, So that is an issue. I think it's a broader issue. Maybe only in a few countries that is possible. And finding out an avenue as a means of livelihood is a very important issue. I don't have any definite answer towards that. I would not say it is bonded labor. It is ideal if you can find that out. But I think our society has to go a long way. But now changes are happening. People are not insisting that you should go for this or that. People have started exploring their interest and started even finding out jobs on there. See, post-COVID is going to have a lot of challenges. Conventional job opportunities are going to, and we'll have to find out job opportunities in certain sectors which have not been explored so far. And also there is a probability of huge reduction in jobs. That is what I feel if things go this way. But we will hope for the best and we will find out. I think the humanity will certainly find a solution to this. But these inequalities and other issues would certainly be going to remain there for longer periods, particularly because of this new situation. And somebody was asking that government and the NSS program coordinator also, the college is not in the registered list. How can we register? If you really want to register, you can write to the regional coordinating institute, or you can write straight away, go to the UBA website and you can apply to be a participating institution, and they will send a list to the regional coordinating institute. They will make a preliminary inquiry and recommend your names, or the regional coordinating institute itself can take the initiative to enroll you as a member of this UBA. And one other thing, I do not know whether I should declare it here or not. NSS is now going to be a part of UBA as per the new guidelines. This is going to come. NSS is going to be integrated with the UBA. Okay, NSS basically is doing similar works, but UBA has got much more clarity with regard to its objective. It's more constructive. So NSS is going to be a part of the program. There are some other
Participants have questions. They can unmute their mic and ask.
And somebody has asked, usually funding for field studies in social sciences is very meager compared to scientific studies. That is quite evident, because technology studies will be inviting more funds because of its immediate applications which are possible. Whereas every university, social science studies have been funded mostly by philanthropist organization or funders for that matter. Particularly in Kerala, it is out of the government funds or the plan funds which we are doing that. But now there are changes coming up. See, for example, if you really want to make a market survey for something, you can be funded. So such things are coming up. Basically, the changes that have been envisaged by the central government in this regard are mostly to make people more professional. I have a difference of opinion with that. All these other disciplines, particularly languages, social sciences, philosophy, etc., all those things have to be there, and all those things have to be duly funded as well. If it cannot be funded by private agencies, it has to be funded by the government. So there is an industry academic linkage which has to come, maybe mostly to fund the technologies, and other disciplines will have to be funded by the government itself. So that would be an ideal situation. It is very evident, science and technology will be funded more. More funds are given to the defense research, more funds are given to space research, more funds are given to atomic research. Because you cannot find too much of funds given to, say, for example, agriculture. Even though we get a lot of funds, compared to the defense research, we are getting less funds. So the priorities are fixed by the government. And now, see, the new package, more funds have been given to health research. Now, virology and other studies are going to take, maybe going to get their due share, which they were not getting earlier. So likewise, from situation changes, there would be some priorities changes. That must be one reason. And somebody said, okay, Dr. Sajimon again, young generation of students are not showing much interest in rural exposure. Much of them are coming from rural areas and they are asking the relevance of rural immersion program. So basically, that is basically because I think out of the lack of our creativity, our ingenuity to develop programs which can attract or draw the attention and interest of the student. It has to be a professional challenge for the student if at all he wants to engage. And you cannot expect every student in a class to be so proactive in doing such. If you can get at least 10 to 20% of students who are showing interest, you can attract the attention of such people. That itself would be a wonderful turnout. I think, but that is why I emphasized on how do you improvise your curriculum and your research priorities and your academic priorities to integrate it with the rural situation and the developmental issue. I think you have to conduct workshops. You can find out resource persons from various sectors. You can have close group discussions, and you can find out how can you make, say for example, how can a Department of Economics be instrumental in engaging students in rural activities? How can the biology department, the botany department be engaged in various developmental activities? Likewise, I think I am an optimist, even though I have pursued an application science, agriculture. I would say every science, for that matter, will be having some or the other kind of an application in development, which you have to explore. Sometimes it would be repetitive in nature, but never mind about that because we are all teaching things repetitively. Repetition is the curse of academics as far as colleges are concerned. And you are teaching the same topic every year with a few changes only. So, but still, I think you are having new faces, new people, new enthusiasm coming up. So you improvise it and try to attract the attention of students, and I think that would certainly solve that issue. So I think so some not much questions. There's instructions and also one or two words of appreciation. Other than that, I don't think. These are all instructions, and also people have notified that they are present. They have, as if you have made you have called for attendance. People have, I am present here, sir. I am present here. Maybe you can print it and use an attendance sheet. Not much questions.
Okay,
so
if
you
there
give
are
me
no
your
further
feedback.
questions.
You give me your feedback afterwards. Maybe sir can give me the feedback. I do not know whether it has been effective or not. You can give me the feedback later.
I request Dr. Tinsey to speak out few words of gratitude to the resource person and the participants.
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected resource person, UBSL members, and dear participants. I'm privileged to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks. On behalf of St. Xavier's College for Women, Aluva, UBSL, I would like to say a very big thank you, sir, to the resource person, Dr. G.P. Alex, sir, for giving us your opinion, your findings, and for giving us real life examples, and also linking the concepts to the current situation. It was a very informative session, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, one and all. I keep looking forward to further association. Thanks once again for this opportunity. Thank you, every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.